Hello, I'm Andrew Gentile,
And I'm Ariana.
and you're listening to Behind the Flicks. This show is all about me. That's it. No. This show is all about me sharing as many facts as I know about filmmaking and directors and behind the scenes info about movies and whatnot to Ariana. And you'll join us for the ride. This episode's guest is Israa Al-Kamali, a director, screenwriter, and co-founder of the Independent Iraqi Film Festival. Israa, welcome to Behind the Flicks.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Israa, could you please tell us a bit about yourself? What led to your path in the film world?
It's a journey. All right. Yeah. So hi everyone who is listening, watching. I'm so happy to be here. I'm a screenwriter, director, producer, also script supervisor. Just try to do everything. My journey with the filmmaking and storytelling world started when I was a young kid. I always wrote stories. I mainly wrote like short stories and ideas for novels, poetry as well. But as I grew up, I started to realize I'm an extremely visual person, and I would imagine the angles, the music, the camera movement, the colors, everything about the story. And but as I was also equally passionate about everything that's going on in the world when it comes to social issues, politics. And as an Iraqi, I was born in Baghdad. That kind of never escaped me. It's just part of my identity, unfortunately, that everything around me and who I am is political. And so I was always gravitated towards the human condition, what makes people do certain things, and also untold stories, stories that people forget about other people. And so I actually did my bachelor's at Georgetown University. I studied foreign service. I majored in culture and politics. And that really fed and informed my storytelling. It really gave me the tools to understand the world around me better and to analyze things around me. And whether that's through like the humanities classes or social science classes or the politics classes or philosophy, all of that really fed into my storytelling. But I still had that passion of really wanting to be on set, really wanting to write a script. So the first time I stepped on set, I was as assistant to the script supervisor, and I remember how everything was just like so busy and how everyone was working hard and like on their feet, and there was so much passion, and the story was amazing. And at the time, I was working in an office, like 9 to 5. I was doing something that I didn't like to do, but I realized that this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Um, Being someone with ADD, I get so bored easily, and so I felt like being on different projects would always helps my brain be alert, and I'm always excited to meet new people and to be in a new place. So anyway, I applied for the MFA program, filmmaking program at New York Film Academy here in LA, and that's when I moved to LA in December of 2020. It was in the middle of COVID, and I quit my job. People were losing their jobs at the time, and like I just quit my job and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And everyone was like, you're crazy. The comfort of the 9 to 5, the corporate world, you get really good money, but you sell your soul, So it's like I couldn't do that anymore. And then that's when I decided to come out here. Yeah, and 2020 is also, before coming to LA, is also when I co-founded the Independent Iraqi Film Festival. We founded it again during lockdown, and it was me and a couple of other of my Iraqi friends who are in not just the filmmaking and the arts, but also they're social activists in themselves, and they do a lot of community work. And we sort of were talking about how we don't see a lot of Iraqi films that are being celebrated and put out in the world. there's so many talented Iraqi filmmakers, but unfortunately, because of the politics, because of the fact that this industry is very classist. It's hard to show your work unless you have money, unless you have submission fees, and like all of that. It's so we wanted to break that barrier. We wanted to celebrate the stories that are coming out from Iraq. We wanted to celebrate the talented filmmakers and storytellers. And we wanted to also like shed light on stories about Iraqis made by Iraqis. Unfortunately, we have a distorted image of who an Iraqi is by the media, and especially some of the films that came out from Hollywood. We're always kind of framed as terrorists or as a target or just as collateral damage. And we don't really hear the stories of the people. And yeah, so it was a huge success. We were featured in different magazines and outlets, GQ magazine, BBC, Al Jazeera, even like ID magazine featured us. So it was really nice to see the community come together and talk about healing, trauma, celebration of the resilience of people and all that.
What a beautiful thing to have done. I mean, just to have something under your belt this early in your career, like that's wonderful. That's a beautiful foundation to show the world what you're trying to do with your film career.
Thank you so much. And yeah, in terms of like my career, I've written short films, directed short films, went to festivals, got some awards. My last short film was a horror feminist short film about a woman who's trying to walk back home at night, but she gets stalked by these predatory headed animal people that ask her misogynistic riddles, and she has to answer them correctly in order to get home safely. And right now, I'm also trying to pitch my feature film, which got quarterfinalist at the Academy's Nicole Screenwriting Fellowship. And it's a coming of age drama. And it's about two high school best friends that are racing against time to document some of the old areas in their neighborhood before it's demolished in the name of progress. I grew up in Qatar, so I was born in Iraq and in Baghdad, but I was displaced after the US-Iraq War, and then I grew up in Qatar. And Qatar
Can I ask what it means to be displaced?
So
if that's yeah.
Yeah, of course. Just do you mean the definition of the word or
I mean I don't know if it has like a meaning outside of the simplicity of like you simply had to move.
Yeah, so usually it's because of war and like the political instability that Iraq went through. I was forced to move out. So the displacement was like not necessarily a choice. And it was just to survive. So I was displaced, me and my family, and we had to seek refuge in Qatar. And in Qatar, that's where I grew up most of my life. But that's where also the FIFA World Cup was hosted recently. And with every country that hosted big mega sporting events like the Olympics or the World Cup always causes a lot of social issues, economic issues, especially to people in middle and lower class. There's a lot of gentrification that happens and a lot of changes that happens to the city. And so many places I grew up around just got demolished or were changed. And every day I would wake up to a new reality. And no one was talking about the impact that was having on people's psyche and how people couldn't keep up with these constant fast-paced changes. So that's what kind of drew me to write that feature story.
To document a truth.
Yes, it's like what I call a race against amnesia, like cultural amnesia. It's like you wake up to a different reality every day and it's like you can't keep up with that. And of course, because of that, you would have resistance from people who want to hold on to more like traditional stuff, or they want to stop this progress. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I really hope somebody who's listening, I have no doubt actually that people are listening can be absolutely inspired by the journey you've made to become a filmmaker and what you've done with it. It's a whole
Thank you,
other matter
guys.
entirely. It's beautiful.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Ariana, our resident film critic, can we please get a review of Aftersun?
Oh yes, I am excited to review this movie of Aftersun. Quick synopsis is that it is on the surface, it is a story about a father and daughter on enjoying a summer vacation. I believe it's summer vacation, some kind of holiday vacation, where they get to spend time together at some sort of resort for which they visited before. And it's just on the surface about, I guess, how their relationship with one another and how they relate. And then a little bit of forward viewing of the daughter's life in the future. Very little dabbles of that, which is extraordinarily well done. But the undersurface is what the real story is. It's so much of not almost nothing of what is said, and only half of what you see is kind of what the story is about. And it's so beautifully done. I remember finishing the movie and having a moment where I'm like, I'm not surprised necessarily, but I'm a little surprised that I was captivated for this whole film. I was so in tune with it. It's so simple. They're just at the resort talking to each other about their scuba diving adventures and their teachers and their life, about seemingly nothing. But the way that it's filmed and the way that it shows how they relate to each other and what the camera focuses on while you're listening to these little seemingly minuscule interactions is what tells this story of the pain of what this father's going through, and the blissful ignorance of his daughter just enjoying time with him, and then reflecting on that as an older woman in her own family is just, I just thought this was so beautiful. And I was so surprised about how intricately woven the filmmaking was visually, and the simplicity of what the actors were doing with each other. And it was just, to me, this was like really, really fantastic filmmaking for a very simple story, made absolutely captivating and relatable to anyone that watches it. I think anybody that watches this could understand what the characters could be going through, and you don't need a whole lot of context. You know very little about their independent lives, and I don't really care. And I think that's something that's very, it surprised me that this is such a modern film. It's only a year old, maybe two. I think it's 2022. It surprised me that this is so new, because I feel like the style is kind of lost in a lot of mainstream movies these days. They're not very quiet anymore. They don't let you just kind of feel through what the characters might be experiencing. They have to tell you everything. And this movie doesn't really do that. It's very it's almost secretive in a very beautiful kind of way. And so I give this one an A easily. To me, it's so difficult to make a film like this that good and that wonderful to watch, and to think that it could be rewatched too. It is a rewatcher. I would rewatch this film and you'd probably pick up on so much more. And that's no easy feat. So these filmmakers are like, they did a great job.
I'll share my thoughts, but Israa, I want to hear why you're fangirling, as you said, over this film.
I'm really drawn to movies that let you sit with the moment and let you and force you to sit with that like long take, where like in the film we see the father going to the balcony and smoking. Like that's like one of the earlier shots when they're in the hotel, and she's just sleeping, and like the framing of it, and you just wait and you're like, what's gonna happen? And he's just smoking, but you watch him almost like a documentary, like this day unfold right before your eyes, and you live and breathe with the characters. And I really love those kinds of films. And for me as a director, I always said that what I'm interested in is when everyone is looking towards a specific direction, let the camera go and show the opposite direction, what everyone is forgetting to look at, what everyone usually ignores. And I think this film really captures that, because sometimes we're looking at a shot that you would normally maybe not look at, or conventionally you would want to cut from and do a more of like a conventional standard type of coverage, but we don't. And it really makes you think, it really makes you feel. And I think the emotions here are so well portrayed. One of my favorite shots as well is when they take a picture at the restaurant, and then they set the Polaroid at the table, and then you see it forming in real time. And it's just a static shot insert of that Polaroid forming, and you would see them sitting next to each other in that picture. And it says something about the movie. And I think what I really loved as well is the fact that it's not just, oh, we're trying to break rules and be very artistic, you know. We're not trying to like how to say this, just show a beautiful frame. No, every single shot did add something to the emotions of the story. So I really enjoyed how it wasn't plot heavy, but it was progressing the story emotionally, and there was a lot of thought put into the logic of the emotion. And I really like breaking rules in writing, filmmaking, and I felt like that did a lot of it. And it was just a new way to look at things. And as you mentioned, Andrew, in fact, in like some of the interviews I watched of Charlotte Wells, she also speaks about a lot of the footage that didn't end up in the movie.
Yeah.
And it was like really interesting to also hear that. And then when she was talking about like why she was choosing specific cuts or shots with the editor, they all focused about what progresses the story emotionally. And also they were so careful about not making people watch some like this movie and think they will be led somewhere else, that they were being led into a specific direction. And what's really beautiful is the shots were not just director, cinematographer, like those decisions didn't come only from those two people. There is one specific shot of the father when he's crying on the bed, and initially they wanted to have it where he's facing the camera or something, but then Paul Mescal said, no, I want to be in this enclosed space, and you have to shoot me from the back. And then initially they were not like sure of how it's going to look like, but then when they shot it, it really felt like the world is closing up on him. And I just love that collaborative nature of it. And this movie reminds me of I think it's Flag Day. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
No.
Flag Day, it's directed and starred by Sean Penn. It went to Cannes, and it is so beautiful. It's also like a father-daughter relationship. There is also some like VHS tape type of like looks into it in it. Highly recommend that too. So films like that, also Atlantics by Matty Diop, it's on Netflix. It has a lot of shots where you can just like breathe the scene, look at what characters are doing.
The moments where they just let you sit and watch what's happening, it pulls you in rather than like pulling you along.
Exactly.
And so you want to sink in, you want to pay attention.
I really appreciate this movie because it backed up what I think the three most important elements are in a narrative filmmaking: the writing, the acting, and the editing. Because in a narrative film, I feel like if the writing's not good and you don't have a good foundation, if the acting's not good, then you don't believe it. If the editing's not good, then it just doesn't come together. And it's like, yeah, all those worked. All those were flawless. For the story that the director was trying to tell, it's pretty close to being perfect in terms of the execution of the vision. So yeah, this is an A film for me too.
Andrew, we agree.
Yeah.
We're on the same page with this one. Israa, what did you do to us?
We agree a lot, Ariana.
I'm recruiting more people to the Aftersun fan club.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like the first time I watched it, like, oh my God, I was crying so much. And it's exactly what you said, Andrew. Like, it really just made me constantly think about it, even the next day and the day after. And a lot of people who watched it, even the ones who were at the Oscars in 2022, because Paul Mescal was nominated for an Oscar for this film. But yeah, no, like even the guests in the Oscars were like, when they were being interviewed, like, oh, what movies have you watched that were nominated, and what's your favorite one? And some of them mentioned Aftersun, and how when they watched it, they also were crying and thinking about it the next day. Yeah, I just think that's like what movies should do, is like have that emotional impact on people. And as you guys mentioned, like it's good writing. For me, like writing is the number one thing. If the story is good, but the visuals aren't the best, it's still a great film. But yeah, writing and then acting, like the performance has to be really well. These two like are very important for a good film. Yeah, I totally agree.
So I'm right.
That's what we got.
That's what I've gotten from this episode thus far, is that Andrew is always right. So how has Israa, how has Aftersun influenced your own work?
I think it kind of validated what I'm trying to do. Because I get often um submerged in other voices. You know, as writers, when you're writing your own work, you get critiques. You have to know how to balance between what is true to your voice versus like, okay, this doesn't work for me, or like I'm gonna take this advice. And I think watching Aftersun really like just emphasized that there's no one way to tell a story. And I think I also have learned it a lot recently. Um, I went to an underground film festival in Chicago, and like all the films were so experimental, again, like non-narrative and new ways of telling stories and visually. So I just felt like this feature film that got a BAFTA, that had an actor that got nominated for an Oscar. There is really not one way to tell a story, and you should listen to your voice. And even like Charlotte Wells was talking about the rave sequence in the film and how it was really hard for readers to understand it, but she had the vision for it and they were able to make it. And so it's like, even listening to how she was fighting for her story, while also like listening, is very important for me. I was also on a feature film where I showed the director Aftersun, and shout out to Zach Goodwin. He was the director, and he really loved like that Polaroid shot as well, and he was inspired by it. So he kind of like did a shot that was inspired by that in his own feature. So I'm just here spreading the love for Aftersun.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's just such a great film, and even her previous work is so fantastic.
Aftersun and movies like it remind you, oh yeah, cinema can do anything, and it's
Mhm.
not all these guys, and it's not just all these mainstream filmmakers. It's, oh yeah, there are experimenters. There are people who are really pushing the form in narrative and experimental. It reminds you, oh yeah, you can do anything in cinema.
Absolutely. I always kind of recently, actually, I feel like I've learned that you should not wait for permission from someone to make your story or your film, and you should not have anyone tell you this is the only way to make a film. My last short film, it was a kind of like, I wouldn't say it's an experimental horror film, neither what it was like, basic narrative. But I had a lot of people also like tell me like this is weird or like this is not whatever. But like, there's always going to be an audience. There's always going to be people who are going to be watching that specific film. There's like 7 billion people on this earth with different interests, tastes, and there will be someone who's going to watch a film, So yeah.
After Charlotte Wells created 3 short films while attending New York University through their graduate film program, she was accepted into the Sundance Institute's Screenwriters and Directors Lab. She used her time at the lab to develop her feature-length debut film, Aftersun. So this
This
is
is
her
her
first film.
debut film?
I know,
Yes,
right?
yes. This is what makes me just so blows my mind. It's her debut film. She got a BAFTA for it, and her actor got nominated for an Oscar for the first time through her film, which always makes me think, why was she not also nominated for Best Director? But that's
He
another story.
deserves it. Holy cow, I can't believe it.
Yes.
And we were talking a little bit earlier about the experimentation. This film feels, what I forgot to say is that this film feels very controlled. Charlotte Wells talks a lot about what was cut from the film, and how in the audio commentary, as well as how she felt like, oh, we didn't have enough time to get this, and we didn't have enough time to get that, and this edit didn't work, and we had to remove this entire scene, and I wasn't quite sure about this. And you look at the final film, it's like this feels a vision, like a vision that was executed in a perfect kind of thing. And it's a classic artist thing of like only she sees the details that are missing.
Yeah.
No, really, that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree because I was surprised when she was saying all of that as well because it felt like it was studied to like the second that this is how it's going to look like, this is how the final product is. Oh, it was always there, but as we know, things constantly change. Like she was saying how like they prepped for the shot list like with her cinematographer, but obviously when you get to location things change. But having that prep work really helped them drive those changes, or like as long as they knew that this is the emotional beat that they're trying to convey, then they will know how to replicate that in any other location that they would find. And I think that just goes to show how much of a good like director she was.
One of the short films Wells made at NYU, titled Tuesday, explores the loss of her own father as a teenager. Aftersun explores similar themes, while at the same time, those themes are more implied than overt. So, one of the things that this is gonna be me getting very personal very fast, Isra, is I've struggled with suicidal ideation in my own past, and it bubbles up every now and again. And so I really admired this film for the way it dealt with it implied those themes in a way that is very well done, and themes of like depression. It shows kind of the reality of how quietly devastating it can be. So I don't know.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, because I dealt, or I still deal with depression, and I often see that, especially with emerging filmmakers, whenever someone is like gravitating towards telling a story about mental health or depression, it's not quite captured well a lot of the times. There's a lot of like stereotypes that are used, and cliche writing that is used, but like with this one, it really truly shows. I don't know, for me as someone, again, getting really personal, who has been through a lot of depression, I noticed those subtle moments, like when her father was going through it. And it's like sometimes I think watching with other friends, and thankfully they haven't been through a depression, but like they would not catch that. And I felt like it spoke to, people like, me, who went through that emotional process. And I felt it was so well represented.
It feels like the reality of it. So I absolutely agree with you.
So I read somewhere that Frankie, the actress that played the little girl, so they didn't give her the full script.
Oh, no kidding. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I read this somewhere where they didn't give her the full script because they wanted to make sure that when she's acting, she truly doesn't know that her father is going through depression. and suicidal thoughts. And so everything that she was doing is genuine. And so Charlotte Wells removed those parts that indicated that her father was like going through something. But then over time, it was becoming clearer and clearer that it is a sad story. And then the actress like that played Sophie, she's such like a machine that like she was so brutally honest that Charlotte Wells was saying in one of her interviews that the girl would be like, oh my God, just go back and do your sad movie. She was calling it a sad movie. But yeah, I mean, like it was really funny. But yeah, I mean, even that for a director is so smart when she was like removing these parts so she can get the best performance.
She did a wonderful job too. Like I believed their relationship 100%. They really were in sync with one another, and you could tell they were both comfortable. I think that I mean, the physicality of it was so light and delicate and genuine to like a father-daughter relationship, and it didn't feel forced at all. And you can tell when actors are comfortable doing things like that. Even something simple like putting sunscreen on a child's back. Like people will watch that and be like making sure it's okay. And you can just see how natural it is for them on screen. And that caters to probably the talent of Charlotte as a director, creating an environment where they felt safe with one another. And the actors, of course, with each other too. So it's nice to see that on screen.
Paul Mescal was brought on board, as you mentioned, to play the character of Caleb. Mescal had his breakout role in the TV miniseries Normal People. Meanwhile, Frankie Corio was cast to play the character of Sophie as a child, who was chosen out over 800 applicants. So it's a lot of kid actors.
Do we know who got brought on first?
Well, in an interview, she mentioned that kind of almost happened at the same time. They just took longer to find Sophie. Frankie, because of the 800 submissions, and they were like online.
Notably, Aftersun was filmed in Turkey in 2021 during the pandemic. Israa, did you work at all during the pandemic?
On and off, like only when we were allowed to go back to set where we had to follow COVID rules.
Yeah, what was that like?
Yeah, like I shot. Oh my God. For independent filmmakers, it was definitely so difficult because COVID added a lot of costs to the budget. And unfortunately, like there was like no support when it comes to that. Whereas like, big studios could still afford a lot. For us, or for me, we have to continue, holding a good standard of safety. And some of that meant, sacrificing crew number or cast. So the total number of crew and cast would be divided by the square foot of the space. And then that's when like the permit office would be like, okay, you have too many people here, or you might have to like find a way to have less people in the location. So for one of my films, the horror one that I was talking about, a lot of the characters are wearing those like predatory headed masks. So they were in masks anyway, so like that was helpful. But also I was able to like reduce the number of cast and then instead maybe like have one of the crew members step in and put the mask on, but then the voiceover would be by an actual actor. So because you would never see their like mouth moving or anything. So tricks like that we had to like really adjust and accommodate to the reality. I'm thankful that things are better now.
Although the majority of Aftersun is filmed on 35mm film, some portions of the movie were shot on a mini DV camera, such as the scene after Sophie goes scuba diving. For that scene, Corio operated the camera herself. And another of the scenes where Corio operated the camera, the production crew were visible within that scene. However, the director liked that take, so the crew was digitally removed from the final film. And it really adds like an authenticity to that scene, to those scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's a really also fun fact about that one where they removed the crew members from the shot. So Charlotte was saying that like when she pans like the camera towards her and then we see like the crew behind, then they sent that footage to the VFX house, and the VFX house saw that okay, there were crew in the shot, but there was also Paul Mescal like dancing. I think his reflection on the TV is there too.
Hmm.
And so they removed Paul's reflection, but they kept the crew for some reason.
What?
And then Charlotte went back to them and was like, "You removed the main actor of the film.
Oh
The
no.
reflection is there on purpose. Keep that. That's part of the aesthetic. But the crew is not."
Wow.
Oh my gosh, what are they thinking?
No idea, but that was so funny.
That's
They
a
were new.
classic miscommunication.
Yeah, that was the call. Somebody called in sick. They're like, "We need a guy to come do this."
I think what I really liked, well, Paul Mescal mentioned this, is that her writing, Charlotte's writing was so meticulous, but she was so free in directing. And I think that is such like a goal to have as a director. She was open to suggestions, but the story was there, and I think that's what he was trying to say. It's a solid story, and he said every time he read the script he would come back to it because he felt like he lost something, but sometimes he felt like he also found something new. And for a script to have someone to always go back to it just shows how well written it was.
Ariana, Isra, final thoughts on Aftersun.
Final thoughts on Aftersun. Couple things. I do like to. I've done this for the past couple of podcasts. I do like to talk about my favorite scene or moment or something, depending on the film. And this one for me is I never pick the ending, but this one I choose the ending because you watch these rave scenes the whole movie, and I don't understand them for the first half, and I'm trying to get it, and then you eventually see him in the dance, and you're slowly putting together what's happening to him and why they might be visual, and then you put it together that it's his daughter, and it's like this beautiful like little hint of what's happening. And then at the very end, and you see him put away the camera in the same shirt that he's dancing in as he walks away into the rave, where it's like, okay, once he's gone from her sight, every vision after him is just what she creates. It's not him anymore. It's just how she feels about him. And that ending was so bow-tied, beautiful, wrapped up from the hints that it displayed through the whole film. That moment where you see him close the camera and walk through those doors was like it was like, oh, it felt good to watch it all come together. Because that was the hardest part for me to put together through the whole film was those rave scenes. Because I knew they meant something really significant, but you really don't fully understand until the very end. And I love that. I was like, damn it, it's a good movie. But other than that, being my favorite scene, Aftersun is worthwhile. I think everybody should go see it if they want to be taken on a handable, a manageable emotional journey. I think sometimes films especially about depression and things like suicide or familial relationships that are really struggling, sometimes they're hard to take in. You finish the film and you're like, I never want to watch that ever again. Like, it was good, but I'm done. It was too much. This film is not like that. It's very relatable and tunes into the subtlety of what it's like to struggle with something like this. And I think it's worth a watch for anybody that is willing to explore a bit more of their emotional side. And I guarantee you, once you watch it, you'll want to watch it again.
I think Ariana, you put it really, really beautifully and well. Like that whole like last scene and him going to the rave. Fun fact, Charlotte was saying that actually they shot, you know how it rotates, the camera rotates from older Sophie into where her father left her when she was young at the airport, and then he goes and walks away to the rave. Apparently the pan continues. They shot it where like it goes back to older Sophie and she gets up and all of that, but like in the editing room they thought that no, when he walks away, that is a more powerful like scene and shot to stick with than having to go back to older Sophie. um yeah, kind of like final thoughts about Aftersun. This is the perfect film about how you can showcase what is unsaid. This film has a lot of subtext, and I think that beautiful films really do really well with subtext, where it shows us what is left unsaid or unexplained. And I think that Aftersun did really well with that. It is an emotional journey. It forces you to sit down and live through a scene, and really challenges the audience. And I think a good film challenges an audience. And if you're a filmmaker who wants to expand their visual storytelling and you want to learn, you should definitely watch Aftersun for the good writing, good performance, and the good shots.
So shout out to the cinematographer of this film, because this movie looks beautiful. I mean this as a compliment. You can tell it was shot on film. Like the colors pop and you see a grain to it, and it gives it like an old aesthetic, which is timeless, like a memory. Point number two, to answer your question, Ariana, what's the moment that I remember? That's the scene I remember the most. It's probably going to be the scene where Paul where the character's name,
Callum.
Callum, his character talks about what his 11th birthday was like to Sophie.
Yeah.
Through
That's really
and
cool.
he, yeah, and instead of like covering it, instead of shooting it through like close-ups or medium shots or like cutting back and forth between, his reaction to her reacting to how he said it, they shoot it through a reflection on the left side of the screen, of a mirror, and then the reflection on the TV on the right side of the screen. So that whole conversation goes on through reflections. Again, like memories. And that's a beautiful, perfect metaphor for what a memory is like. You don't quite like, sometimes when I think of a memory, or I'm talking to someone, I'm not staring, or at least as when I was a kid, I'm not directly looking at them. I'm like looking at the ground, or I'm like looking all over like I'm looking somewhere else when somebody's talking. And that's what I remember. And so it captures kind of like that flash of the past,
Yeah.
and that's very powerful. So that's my favorite scene. And the last thing that I'd like to note is that there was this film critic named Roger Ebert who said a quote that I like, but I don't quite agree with it 100%, but I like the sentiment behind it. He said, movies are like machines that generate empathy. And if there's ever a movie that would be used as evidence, that they're machines that generate empathy, Aftersun would certainly be on that list. It dives into the experience of others, and that's why I think it's great about it. Israa, two final questions for you. What do you have to promote, and where can people follow you?
Well, you can follow me on Instagram at Israa Al-Kamali. That's my first name, last name, IsraaAlkamali. And right now I'm promoting in terms of my work. I am pitching my feature film, The Anxious Place, and you can also find it on Instagram. And I would love to find someone to help me bring it to life. But as a person, I want to promote that people chase their dreams and do what they love and really tell authentic stories that come from the heart, and to really stick to your vision and not wait for anyone's permission to do what you want.
Listeners, if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, feel free to shoot us an email at independentcareerstudios@gmail.com. If you like this episode, please write a review and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, or YouTube. We'd love to hear your feedback. Behind the Flicks was created by myself and Ariana. I wrote and edited this episode. My name is Aaron Gentile. This has been an Independent Career Studios production.